Mr. Board President, members of the board. We did want to update you on two of our bus planning, if you will, or service planning initiatives. The most high profile and most important for you to sort of check in on is the service planning associated with the opening of the Orange Line. And that is fast approaching. As Dan Blocker noted at the Finance Committee, 1 year and 1 day less than, so we're actually at what, 364 days until we actually open the Orange Line. So we are in the midst of bus service planning, and this service plan needs to be completed really by about the end of the year for us to be able to integrate it into our operations. So with that, we have guest star Alan Lato.
Great, thanks,
Jennifer
Neil.
Kuzer.
Mr. President and members of the board, I have Jennifer Kuzer with me as well, who has been doing a lot of the engagement and outreach on this, doing great work, talking to people and understanding what the needs are. So as Neil said, we're actually just about 13 months, I guess, from opening, since it'll be in September of 2015, the Orange Line Max. And as you know, we have to be ready many months in advance of any kind of significant change to bus service. And so we are proceeding on understanding what that service is going to look like when the Orange Line opens. And I want to share with you some of what we've heard, some of how we've responded. There's a draft proposal out there for public comment right now, and then we'll be refining that over time. You can see a little bit of the timeline. Really, all of the decisions essentially need to be made in 2014 to be ready for that September 2015 opening. And we've done a lot of listening and trying to understand the needs. We put together a draft proposal, and that draft proposal is right now out for review and comment. And then we'll be taking all that back, refining the proposal, and then sharing that out and finalizing the plan by about the end of the year. We had a few assumptions going in before we even started all of that came out of some of the initial service planning around the capital project itself. That included the need to minimize duplicative service on McLaughlin, north of Milwaukee, the opportunity to get some buses out of congestion on the Ross Island Bridge and the approaches on both ends to use the Tillicum crossing. And really no other significant changes or new service. When we went to the public and started sharing the initial assumptions and really being out there to listen, a lot of what we heard were about interest in transferring to the Orange Line and making sure that that's a net add to the network and the ability to move around, what kinds of service there would be north of Milwaukee and how connections would work from south of there, from areas like Oregon City and Gladstone, and then service on specific areas like on Tacoma Avenue and across the Selwood Bridge, which will be done sometime around after we're open with the Orange Line. As well as connections to the Milwaukee Park and Ride and connections to the Tacoma Street Johnson Creek Boulevard or Johnson Creek Station from both sides. And we really wanted to respond to that as much as possible and maximize the investment, expand connections, and this is where I mention, you'll hear just a little bit more in a few minutes about our service enhancement plans, future of transit efforts. So yes, we need to make this decision for September 2015, but we've also got our eye on what's the long-term expansion of the network look like to take advantage of this and maximize the benefit. I want to talk you through very briefly what the current concept looks like and just zoom in on a few points. One is there are I'll just talk you through a couple of highlights and feel free to ask me questions at any point. There are two lines on here that we're showing taking advantage of the new Tillicum crossing, which does two things. One, it gets them out of the congestion going across the Ross Island Bridge. And two, it picks up those new connections in South Waterfront and on the east side on the OMSI, connections that are difficult to make from the current line. And that's the number 9 on Powell and the number 17 Holgate. And then they would proceed from the transitway up to the mall. Here you can see on McLaughlin, the new Orange Line providing service in that area. And then the Line 99, which is currently a limited stop service that goes all the way from Oregon City to downtown, continuing into downtown but not duplicating the Orange Line service, creating a new connection and actually providing the first service across the Selwood Bridge that will have happened for a number of years to provide some service on Tacoma and that connection between the east side and the west side, as well as downtown. This would be peak only, but peak only in both directions, whereas the 99 today is only in one direction, the peak direction. In addition, the line 28, you can see the connection between the 28 and the 34. The 28 would get some more frequency and be rerouted to provide a better connection to the Tacoma Street Johnson Creek station, so that that helps provide that connection from the Milwaukee Park and Ride, which is the little pink dot in between the two stations, not at either one of the stations, and why we need that additional connection. Looking at the south end now, then, from Milwaukee, downtown Milwaukee to the south, you can see the basic route structure stays the same. Certainly the 33, which is the McLaughlin line, the frequent service line, continues to serve the southern half of McLaughlin, connects to Park Avenue, and then ends in downtown Milwaukee. We look at having that additional frequency, like I said, on the 28 on the north end, and connecting that to the 34 for any trips that are connecting between those two areas. That's the very high level. We've been sharing that with our partners, with the public, with communities, with neighborhood associations, business associations. Over 1,300 comments, 4,000 onboard contacts. So we've been riding the lines, talking to people and letting them know what might happen and trying to understand what their interests are. You can see all the mailings and emails and appearances. And so our next steps on this are to refine this fall based on the input that we get, and then kind of finalize that by the year end. And then we'll go into service along with the opening of the orange line. The one variable there is exactly when the Selwood Bridge opens. We're still trying to understand that with Multnomah County, which is the lead on that bridge. Likely not going to line up perfectly with our opening, and so we'll need to figure out an interim plan for that one connection. But otherwise, that's the picture that we're looking at. I don't know if, Jennifer, you had anything else to add. Great. Questions? Yes.
Yeah. Seeing the steps that you've taken to get input, have we conducted that in different languages, and what is our breakdown in terms of our ethnic and racial communities participating?
We produce the materials in English and in Spanish, and we estimate that we distributed about 200 pieces of the information on board. But the transit equity analysis will take place after we get a little bit more detail on the proposed service.
Okay, so I know also in that area there's a large Southeast Asian community as well. Have we reached out to them?
Not specifically.
Okay. I would really like, I think this is a discussion that we continue to have in terms of reaching communities of color and different ethnic and racial groups, and I really can't stress enough that we cannot not continue to do that. I think that it's viable, and it's why we have the TIAC advisory committee, so I just really would like to make sure that we continue that and to make sure that it happens. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
So this fall sometime you'll kind of have a rough draft of what you think changes will be to the various lines?
Right, we'll refine that proposal and then bring it back.
Okay, as a draft, that'll be the kind of talking points for the talking discussion for going back out.
Right, yeah,
community.
with the expectation that, you know, we will have done our best to respond to most of the needs and kind of share that finally, and then try to finalize it by the end of the year.
Okay, great. Any other questions? Nope. Thank you very much, appreciate it. And our last item is the service enhancement plan.
So I'm going to stay right where I am. And Steve Kautz and Tom Mills are joining me. I'll ask them to talk in just a minute. Steve Kautz is leading the East Side Service Enhancement Plan, and Tom Mills is leading the Southwest Service Enhancement Plan. And so we'll give you an update on both of them. Just to give a little bit, you've heard some of this from me before, so a very high level, very quick introduction. We have tried to make sure that we are really paying attention not just to what are we doing with service next year, but where are we going in the long run? What is that vision that we as a community, not just TriMet, but all of the communities in the region share in terms of what's needed for future service? And there was no way to have that conversation for the entire district all at once. So we split it in 5 areas. And the 2 that we'll be talking about here. I did mention also that the Southeast is underway. We're letting the PMLR, the orange line, get just a little bit farther ahead so that there's not too much confusion with the public, but we are taking advantage of the public dialogue to take comments and be on a listening tour sort of for Southeast as well. So the service enhancement plans, as I said, trying to make sure that this is a really meaningful engagement and conversation with the public and stakeholders to create that shared vision. The Metro has just released some numbers that say that they're predicting 400,000 plus new people moving to the region in the next 20 years. All of them are going to move generally into areas that are already developed. And we're going to need to respond to the need to carry more and more people as time goes on. And so this becomes the vision, the template for which we try to make incremental improvements each year towards. And really focusing on the important things like connections to jobs, education, and services. The timeline real quickly, we have developed the vision with Tom's lead for the west side and gotten a lot of very good positive feedback on that. Now are in the implementation stages for that. And then we're working on, you'll hear this east side and southwest, sort of somewhat ahead of the southeast and north central, but we've triggered all of them. They are all underway. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Tom.
Thank you, Alan. Thank you. I am leading the Southwest Service Enhancement Plan process, and I wanted to talk to you a little bit about where we are with that. But also this slide here generally explains the process we go through for all the service enhancement plans. And so we start at the top with research, data, mapping that data. Where do people live? Where do they work? What are the trips they're trying to make? We're using data from the census, but also data collected by Metro that's more locally generated. But then we also have an aggressive outreach process, a comprehensive outreach process where we talk to communities and stakeholders to learn about what they would like to see for improved transit service. And then we take all that information and we say to ourselves, what is the common theme here? What is the story that we're really learning here? And then with that information, we develop a vision, and that's something I'm going to share with you today. Essentially, it's kind of a new transit map and what it would look like in 20 years from now if we're able to complete and completely implement these plans. But then once we develop that draft vision, we gather feedback, and that's where I am today currently in the Southwest process. I'm getting more feedback from the community. What do you think of this draft vision? And once that is completed, then we make refinements, and then we'll go back out. And we'll go back out as many times as it takes to kind of generally get a good feel that the community agrees with where we're going. Obviously, we can't make everyone happy, but we want to get a general feeling that yes, indeed, this is where we want to see our transit system grow. And then finally, we'll have the final plan. So I mentioned that we collect data and then we map the data. And we're really lucky with the tools that we have. We've always been able to kind of know where the jobs are and know where people live. But it's always been difficult to say, okay, but of the people who work here, where do they live? And of the people who live here, where do they work? We're now able to do that with the tools we have. And so this is just showing you a couple examples. For example, in Washington Square, we said, well, of the people who live or work in Washington Square, where do they live? And it really shows us that in kind of the Shoals Ferry Road, Northwest Tigard, there's a large concentration of those employees. Likewise, on the residential side, we looked at an example is looking at Sherwood and saying, okay, of the people who live in the largest concentration of Sherwood residents, where do they work? And, I like to say that kind of looks like a transit route right there, going from Sherwood through the Tualatin industrial area and up into Tigard. But as I said, we also conducted a great deal of outreach. We held a series of community meetings, the first 6 of which were kind of open to everyone, come one, come all. But beyond that, we also reached out to communities of people who generally don't show up at a community meeting. So, for example, we reached out, I held a session with the Tualatin Youth Advisory Committee as an effort to kind of get input from youth. We had a transportation day at St. Anthony's Church in Tigard. St. Anthony's Church holds masses in English, Spanish, and Vietnamese. And at that event, we had materials in English, Spanish, and Vietnamese. We had people who spoke English and Spanish and Vietnamese to do interpretation for us if we needed it. And it was a great event. We kind of positioned ourselves in the coffee and donuts area, which was the most popular area, and had probably over 200 people come by and speak to us. Of course, OHSU, they're the largest employer in the Southwest. And then also an effort to reach out to seniors. We held an event at Neighborhood House during one of the senior center lunches. All in all, we had over 200 people participate in our community meetings. And the whole while, we've been also meeting with stakeholders, and we've met with over 60 different stakeholder groups. This is just a fun map that I like to show out. During our community meetings, we rolled out a map that looked like this with those purple circles, which are destinations, and we gave people markers, and we said, tell us where you want to see new or improved service. And this is a map. I basically mapped what they told us. So the thicker the line, the more popular the line. So you can see in the Tualatin industrial area, Durham Road in Tigard, Sherwood, connecting Tualatin to Westland were all very popular. But we also did a transit survey, and this survey was online. It was also hard copy, and it was also in English, Spanish, and Vietnamese. We also reached out through Facebook for the first time. We did a survey on Facebook in English, Spanish, and Vietnamese, and we received responses in all 3 languages on Facebook, so that was pretty neat. All in all, we had over 1,800 respondents to our survey. So this is just a quick concept map that tells the story of transit in Southwest. Basically, if we go back, even before TriMet was formed, the largest share of jobs and destinations was to downtown Portland, and that's what the transit network mostly looked like. But over time, new destinations have emerged, particularly job centers, and with those new destinations are new travel patterns, some of which we serve today, but other patterns that we don't serve quite so well. And so that's what we're trying to address with the Service Enhancement Plan. So I apologize, this is pretty small here, and my laser pointer is not working, but this is what we have today, and you can see some large gaps in service. Particularly in the Tualatin industrial area, in West Lynn, Northwest Tigard, even parts of Southwest Portland. And this is what we're proposing. So there's a lot more lines on the map that address those areas that I mentioned, but you'll also notice those kind of yellow hatched areas. Those are areas that we call them community connector service areas. And if you recall a year ago with the West Side Service Enhancement Plan, we had another area similar to those in Forest Grove and Cornelius, where we just kind of said, this is an area where we want to partner with the jurisdiction and potentially a third party to find a way to more efficiently operate service. And, we just had a blob on the map, just like what I just showed you. And a year later, we partnered with Forest Grove, we partnered with Ride Connection, and together everyone developed a route network that would work, that Ride Connection would operate. And today it carries almost 150 riders a day, or boardings a day, I should say. So with that is where we are with the Southwest Service Enhancement Plan. I'm going to turn this over to Steve.
Thank you, Tom. Just to give you a quick update on our work in the East Side Service Enhancement Plan. As you've already heard, the whole context here is how can we learn about community needs and aspirations and visions, and then shape a shared vision for better transit in the future. In this case, to serve the changing face of the East Side. In the East Side, we see growing population, job centers, education, health, and community service needs are increasing and projected to continue to grow. We also are very aware that the area has above average concentrations of folks that we would consider to be transportation disadvantaged populations, minority, low income, youth, and limited English proficiency. So how do we provide connections to jobs and services within the east side and also to the west and to the south throughout the region? In our overall process for east side, we're in the first phase of community engagement, building our understanding of needs, community plans and visions. We'll be continuing in this through the summer. This fall, we'll be laying out a draft vision for improved and expanded services, and then preparing for that second round of engagement to hear from community stakeholders about the draft vision and get input. And that will be through the remainder of this calendar year and into early 2015. And broadly, we expect that we'll be able to complete the vision for East Side by late summer of next calendar year. In our engagement on East Side, we have had 5 initial community meetings in May. We have an opportunity to get folks around the table, take the markers, as Tom was explaining, actually draw where would new connections be helpful, where would more frequent service be helpful. We got great input through that. But we've also worked directly with community agency partners East Side to make special efforts to reach out to the transportation disadvantaged populations. And we've had 3 focused meetings targeted in that regard so far. One was held in the Rockwood area of East Portland, and that was a meeting conducted in Spanish. We had a couple of interpreters there. They were interpreting for me and one other non-Spanish speaker that was present. We had Spanish-speaking staff and facilitators there, and about 40 people there, and it was a great discussion. Also, we've worked with Immigrant Refugee Community Organization, IRCO, in a major needs assessment work that they did this spring. Plugged into that, also we've had an opportunity to work with Reynolds High School. So we'll be doing more of that, but so far we've had over 150 folks directly involved in our community and key population meetings, 50 plus meetings with stakeholders, and probably well over 700 contacts so far. We have some emerging themes from the input we've received so far coming through pretty loud and clear. Overall, more frequent service on our existing lines serving East Side, and in several cases having those services start earlier in the day, run later in the day. Also, obviously, service being added on weekends. We think about the concept of our transit network as a grid, and we do have the benefit East Side of having a good network of east-west, north-south major arterials. We're serving many of those, but there are some gaps. So we're certainly hearing about what about service on north-south on, say, 148th, 162nd, major north-south corridors we currently don't serve. Similarly, in the Gresham area on Hogan and 242nd, the possibility of some additional north-south service there has been coming through. And east-west, we do have a gap, for instance, on Gleason, which we currently don't serve Gleason east of 181st on out to Mount Hood Community College area. So that's been brought forward as a future need. Also hearing about how can we improve connections to job centers that may be just beyond our current network. Some of that last mile challenge that we face elsewhere, we do see some of that East Side, so we're looking at that. And then better local and neighborhood connections. And again, the possibility of community connector services certainly may offer something for us on the East Side as well. And then last but certainly not least is continuing to improve our bus stops and the pedestrian network and safe crossings. A lot of partnership investment already underway East Side, but certainly the needs are great, and we need to continue with that. Just to wrap up then, I think we see on our next steps, we're going to keep moving forward with outreach. That's ongoing. We have a survey of major employers currently out in the field, and we'll be gearing up for a public survey soon, getting that out sometime next month. We expect we'll be forming elements for the draft vision this fall and getting out with our next phase of engagement then this fall and winter. And we are also, have had the opportunity to speak with TIAC, and we'll be continuing to do that, about how can we fine tune our outreach to communities of concern and continue to build our network working with agency partners. So that's ongoing as well. With that, would invite for all of us your comments or questions.
Maybe I'll just kind of finish real quickly. I mentioned, 400,000 new people coming into the region over the next 20 years. That's the equivalent of a new Hillsborough moving in every 5 years or so. And so we're trying very hard, you can hear, to understand what the current needs are, current wishes are, but also with the cities and counties to understand what the future projections are in terms of needs for mobility and moving around and supporting economic growth and access to education and all those important things we do. So doing our best in, as you heard, Board Member Saragosa, several different languages to do our best to understand what those needs and wishes are to create that shared vision for future transit.
No, just to comment, it's not that TriMet hasn't increased the effort, definitely, it really has. But as I was sitting here, hearing, and having the presentation at TIAC in terms of what's happening with East County, so I'm thinking, as an organization, do we have a policy, or do we have something that tells us when we go into whatever community it is, are we doing the list of 1 to 5? So I see a hole in our practice in terms of what are those steps that we're doing. So I guess I'd like to hear the response, and if not, how are we going to make sure that happens?
Yeah, I think for our service enhancement plan efforts, especially, we've been kind of pushing the envelope a little bit more towards what you're talking about, making sure that we have materials not just in English and Spanish, but in a number of different languages as well. Martin Gonzalez is the best person to talk about, how we make that decision about which languages to engage in, and it's based on the prevalence of the language and the ability of folks to converse in English and the number and the effort to do so and all of that.
Right. No, and I understand that, but it's not Martin who follows the policy.
Right.
I guess that's what I'm getting
Right,
at.
and we're doing what we can to coordinate with him to understand, well, what are the needs and how should we best engage?
Right. Yeah, because you're delivering it.
Right.
He's not. He's putting it together so that you can support you in delivering that.
Absolutely.
So that's
And
what I'm talking about.
we'll continue to try to focus on that more and more, given
Thanks.
your guidance.
I might just also note that I think that's one of the big contributions we see from TIAC as well, which is this isn't something that we're all automatically expert in, right? And so we need to listen to our community, and the TIAC is a great forum to advise us on that with the, as you know, very involved and very expert people that staff that committee.
Great, thanks.
Are you suggesting we need a policy on that? Is that?
Well, that's my question. I'm a little, yes, what are our steps? We may need a policy. Maybe that's something that comes to TIAC. I guess it's to understand that when, as I said, when we go into different communities, are we making sure that our outreach is really reaching those intended communities in that area? So I don't know if we do, so that's my question. And if not, that probably needs to be a discussion. Yeah.
Right. Thank you. We look forward to seeing the results of all these in terms of what it means. I think I followed the news reports, media reports from your meetings, and kind of the overwhelming, what I saw was the elected officials saying, "Want more and more service. We want more service. We want more service." So I understand the desire is out there, and so we've got to figure out a way to come up with a plan that actually meets our ability to deliver and can be implemented over time, I assume, is what we're going to be talking about here. So good work. Thanks for the outreach. I'm sure it's been very valuable for us and them. I see nothing else. Is there anything else to come before us today?
There's some questions. Any board members have?
All
Thank
right,
you for your
thank you very
patience
much.
today.
You bet.
The long one.
Yeah.
This is what once a month could look like.
Maybe, both.